this idea that people end up tying their identity to a set of ideas, and when that gets attacked, the regions of the brain light up that have to do with, whoa, you're attacking me. It seems to me that the only way out of this trap, and that you can literally draw a line in the sand in my life of before this realization and after. So I used to value myself for being smart. That was leading me down very weird paths because I would say I'm sort of middle of the road. I'm fine. I can get by. But I am not going to be celebrated necessarily for one of the great intellects of all time. And so I realized that by valuing myself for being smart, anything that attacked that notion was just, I could not have it. And so I had to switch what I built my identity around to being that of the learner. And once I switched my identity to, oh, I don't mind being told that I'm wrong. Oh, I don't mind realizing that I don't have the right answer. Oh, I don't mind whatever. Just like, hey, if it's true, meaning if I act as if that thing is true, I can better predict the outcome of my behaviors. I'm going to adopt that. And so it became about building my ego around my willingness to stare nakedly at my inadequacies. And so that just radically changed my life. I don't see another way out of this. I think everybody, if you want to make your life better, that's the only answer. The only answer, you need an ego, you need self-esteem, you need to feel good about who you are, you need a sense of identity, you need to be able to say who you are and what value system you live by. Is there another way, or is that the one?
Well, what you're really talking about is you're taking a backpack that is heavy with rock size, with rocks that are this description of your identity and these characteristics you pride yourself on, and the things you feel certain about and that you need to make sure everyone knows you're so smart about. And all these labels you put on yourself, right? Those are all rocks that weigh down the backpack. It's heavy. What you're talking about is the magical hack of putting down the backpack and saying, actually, I'm just a learner, like you said, or some humble thing. I'm just an individual who's complicated, who evolves, and I'm just that awareness inside of the individual. And I'm going to try to get less wrong throughout my life. And I'm going to be wrong a lot, though. And I'm going to evolve. And I might be into this kind of stuff this year. And then I'll change my mind next year. I'm not part of any tribe or group necessarily, unless it's in kind of a fun way where I'm not taking it very seriously. It's liberating, right? And you're light suddenly, and now you're free you can start skipping around, learning stuff and exploring stuff and trying things. People will also like you more because you just come off more humble. It makes you seem wiser, and your ego is not getting threatened when so many different things happen, right? You're not a little petty person. So yes, but this is very hard. And you talked about meaning and identity and purpose and connection and all these things that we need. And one of my main problems with movements, a lot of certain political movements, is the ones that, and then this is no different than cults and other things, when they tell you all your answers are here. You come and join our thing and you have meaning and you have purpose and you have identity and you have righteousness and you have connection and you have a community. You know who you are now because now you are a blankist, you're whatever it is. And when you come here, all of those holes that are so painful and so hard to fill, it's like a get-rich-quick scheme. Come here, and you got it, and you have all those things. Just join our army. Of course, it's snake oil. It's a trap because those things are hard, and they emerge from deep, unique individualism that happens over long periods of time. You start to figure out meaning for yourself. You start to figure out, your purpose and what you really care about and what you really believe, right? One of the things these movements promise you is a full setup, ready to go, one-stop shop for all strong opinions. Now you know what every political issue you have, every moral thing, it's easy now. You have your answer. This is what the good people think. This is what the bad people think. Memorize the checklist and you're good to go. Read these core op-eds that we all pass around, and you know how to say all the right arguments. And so to me, what those things are doing is they're not actually filling any of those holes. They're just a kind of a sleazy get-rich-quick scheme that lures in vulnerable people. These are it's never bad people joining these things or believing these things. It's all often these things prey on people's empathy or their desire for connection or these human things. But to me, it's very, it's no different than kind of an abusive cult in a lot of ways. And I think that what the wise thing to teach people, especially vulnerable people, is that, you feel so bad about yourself for not knowing your meaning and not having strong opinions and not knowing what you think about all this. But actually, that's okay. No one really, most people don't know, and that's okay. And because none of that is who you are. You're really this internal awareness, and you're free to be any of these things. That's what I would want to tell people, as opposed to saying, in a certain mentality, if you don't have strong opinions on everything, you sound like an idiot, right? And I would say, no, that is not correct, right? It's that the people who have unearned conviction about everything, they're blowhards, and they don't actually, their egos are just going buck wild. So I feel like it's the exact opposite advice, and I feel like somewhere along the way you got a much better message, or you learned a much better message because, and I can say it's better because it's just, I think it's more realistic, and it is. It's as I said, it's liberating.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, it was getting kicked in the face by some things I did worked and other things I didn't. And I realized that I was arguing for ideas that made me feel the way I wanted to feel, but I knew that they weren't going to work in a business context. And I don't know if without the marketplace saying, hey, we actually will buy this, we'll pay money for this thing, we're not going to pay money for that thing. If I didn't have that just brutal objective clarity of, one course of action, I go out of business, the other course of action, I thrive, is very sobering. And that forced me to realize, okay, if I argue for this idea because it makes me feel smart, or you're going to think I'm smart if I can convince you, but the market won't be swayed. I don't know if I ever would have gotten there. And so this goes back to something I already said, but I see really well-intentioned people get lost in the sequence of every answer is going to be nuanced. Nuance is very hard if you can't talk out loud. If there are certain ideas that are just off the table and you're not allowed to have them, then you're not going to talk out loud, which means that you're never going to go from wrong to right. And so you're just going to run down the checklist of, I want to please my tribe and fit in and not be ostracized, which is leveraging the primitive mind against me. And this is where we end up. And so I'm really unnerved. I'm worried about the idea that you put it in your book, but you use different words. The classic being hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. And so you go in this loop. And in the book, you say, can we not just skip the hard times part? I worry that we can't.
Yeah, and it's especially scary because, and so I reframed it just because it's not quite, I just don't think that, what is a hard man, a weak man, or whatever it is. Sorry, it's a strong. And to me, it was like, what it really is to me is it's wise people create good times. Wise meaning people who see how bad things can get. They've usually because they've experienced it themselves, and they don't take anything for granted, and they work really hard with humility and collaboration to because they know how important it is to build systems that create good times. When people have lived in good times for a few generations, they don't find them precious, and they don't thank their stars every morning for, oh my God, I get to wake up in good times. They just think this is how things are. In fact, actually things suck, and they start to, you calibrate. This is no different than a human. If human is X amount of money, and they just dream of having 10x, and they get 10x, they suddenly have all these complaints about not having 100x, right? So it's the same thing. You get good times for too long, you stop appreciating it, and instead of all the kids learning civics and saying, well, okay, we have to all work together to keep good times, they say good times are just how things are. Whatever these times are, this is just how things are. And they stop teaching kids civics, and people start doing all the things that actually create bad times, and loosening all of this really well thought out structure starts, all the different support beams start to weaken. So that's why I go from, wise people create good times for too long creates foolish people. And foolish people eventually will drive you right into bad times. And, bad times is, whatever, civilizational collapse. It's happened many, many, many times before.
Mm-hmm.
Or just some awful, unwise war, whatever it is. And then hundreds of millions of people die. So for those people, that's the end of the cycle. But in the rubble, you know, a couple decades later, wise people emerge, and an excruciating process that usually the people who experience bad times aren't even around anymore. Their grandkids can be back in good times, right? So this is this cycle. And the reason that it's so scary right now is, you know, bad times, if you read history, it's wow, it's a lot of bad times. And they'll say things and I'm like, that sounds awful, like terrifying. Like there's a lot of like actual King Joffreys out there and like slavery, like rampant slavery all over the place for thousands of years. And it's like, imagine how awful that is. And like rape and just complete massive injustice and crushing poverty, right? And so you think about how awful this is, but in some ways, what's weird is that the 20th century was, you know, the best yet in so many metrics. You have the best GDP per capita, life expectancy just skyrockets around the world. You know, medical technology, extreme poverty is at its lowest ever, and so you have this incredible prosperity. In that same century, when things did go badly, they went really badly. You had the biggest genocides ever. You had the biggest wars ever. You had suddenly a new thing, which is complete existential threats, existential risks like nukes, right? You didn't have an existential threat in the 1700s. There was nothing that might have killed all of humanity that we did with our own foolishness, right? You didn't have that much power as a species. So suddenly in the 20th century, we're developing these giant magic wands that we can suddenly shoot at things and we might just kill ourselves. So the 20th century was the best ever and also in some ways the most vulnerable and scariest ever with the biggest tragedies. So now apply that to the next century. It's just even more. We're going to have even better prosperity. Life expectancy is continuing to go up. You're going to completely eradicate disease and poverty, and it's going to be amazing, genuinely amazing, except if this goes wrong, when things go bad, if we sink to bad times on that merry-go-round in the 21st century, you know, with all the power we have and all the many different kinds of existential risks we have, nukes is just one of them now. It could be the worst ever. We should be really scared. The stakes get higher as tech gets more exponential. The good times get better, but the bad times get worse. And right now, since we're just living in objectively pretty overall good times, people are not scared enough of bad times. They just take it for granted. It's just human nature. I do it. As soon as I finish this conversation, I'll go back on with my life and stop feeling scared because I grew up this way and my parents grew up this way. And like, we have a good life and that life is good and everything ends up fine. And that's wrong. We should not be thinking that way. We should be scared and we should be working really hard to teach kids civics and to say, you know, how can we be wise together and uphold this kind of liberal democracy?
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.